Tad šajā sadaļā mums būs iespējams uzklausīt speciālistu, unikālu personību pasaules mērogā. Sporta ārsts, kurš palīdzējis Silvestram Stallonem uzturēt sevi formu Rocky lomās, piedalījies kā ārsts 5 olimpiskajās spēlēs, strādājis ar ASV olimpisko komandu, Salvadoras un Sierra Leones komandām, kā arī Latvijas olimpiešiem. To darījis brīvprātīgi, palīdzējis pirms atbildīgiem startiem pasaules slavenākiem vieglatlētiem, kā piemēram Gailai Diversai, Džekijai Džaunerai Kersijai, arī Monako princis Alberts ir vērsies pie viņa pēc padoma. Būdams gerontoloģijas profesors, sarakstījis grāmatu pasaules bestselleru Age Right vai latvisko versiju vienmēr 39. Dāmas un kungi, tas ir Kārlis Ullis. Laiks un attālums šoreiz dara savu. Tiešsaitē Kārlis nevarēja uzstāties, bet esam saņēmuši vakar no Kāļra runu ierakstā. Pēc video demonstrācijas jūs droši varēsiet uzrakstīt jautājumus e-pastu info@bērnurepublika.lv ar piebildi Kārlim Ullim. Mēs šos jautājumus nodosim Kārlim, un laika gaitā jūs saņemsiet atbildes. Vēl atgādinu, ka pēc kāda laika video tiks ievietots ar tulkojumu. Lūdzu video.
Sveiki semināram Talants, kā to atrast un attīstīt. Šodien es tiešraidi nevaru piedalīties, tāpēc jums sagatavoju šo video angļu valodā. I will talk about healthy eating for young athletes to feel better and perform better. Food intake does change over time. Athletes grow, their sports change, and therefore there's no such thing as a set one type of eating pattern or diet. And we do know if you don't eat well or correctly, it does affect your performance a lot. I'll discuss that later. Now, there's a really problem right now because of the COVID virus. No one can actually train as they normally would, and they can't perform or compete. So therefore, however, this talk will aim to a situation if there was no virus and everything was normal. So, now I'm going to show you a growth chart. And this is a chart for boys, and up on the top is the height. And you see all these lines, and with these lines, you can then plot and mark an X for the height and also for the age. Down here is the weight. The same thing here. You put an X for the age and also the weight. Then should you see a big deviation in these X's, either going up or down, in either height or weight or both, you should make some investigation and try to normalize it. Okay, the basis of this chart is very important because then it tells you where to begin. Is your child already underweight? Is your child overweight? And what should you do at the beginning of a sports development program? So sometimes there's a growth spurt which can affect this whole system. So you've got to take into consideration growth spurts and other things that happen in the children's development. Now, children are also picky eaters. There are some children who just will not eat certain vegetables or won't eat fish. Well, don't make a big deal of it, but you should, if they completely don't have enough vitamins and minerals, then you may have to substitute with some kind of powders or mineral vitamins and so on and so forth. Now, there is such an issue of eating disorders. We see that more commonly in girls who are long-distance runners. There are also gymnasts who have to keep their weight down, or they actually lose weight, like the long-distance runners, to the point where their menstrual cycle stops, they feel lousy, their bones are very weak. So those women need to be sent to a special counselor to deal with these eating disorder problems. Eating disorders also do occur in men, but it's not as frequent. But still, it's something to watch out for because it needs professional therapy. Now, I'm going to discuss the top foods as needed for sports. Carbohydrate is probably the number one food of all. Why? Because it's the source of energy. I mean, where does energy come from? Carbohydrates. Doesn't come from protein, does not come from fat. So the carbohydrate goes into muscle, turns to glycogen. The glycogen is the food source, which goes into the ATP molecule and then forms energy molecules. So carbohydrates, if you're doing long distance, really long training, make sure you're getting enough carbohydrate. Now, I like brown rice as a carbohydrate. It is, I think, better than the other kinds of rice. It has more vitamins. And I also like things like parslas, because those are really good as well for breakfast, but it's also, if you have them in steel cut, you don't lose the nutrient value when they're rolled. So those are two really good foods for carbohydrates. Now, children also do like pastas, spaghetti, and various like McDonald's nuggets. The nuggets are a good source actually of protein, so I don't really object to that so much. Now, Latvia has a great variety of breads. We should take advantage of that. So don't go out and eat a lot of white bread and a lot of white rolls and such. Take advantage. Try to get the Latvian breads, which are whole grain and are organically grown, and try to get the ones, sometimes they even have the ones that are sprouted wheat type. So make sure you try to get the best bread to eat for yourself and your children. Now, eggs are something that people eat almost every day. I mean, there's been controversy about too many eggs and maybe high cholesterol and so on and so forth. Well, it's been shown that eating 1 to 2 eggs a day does not really produce more heart attacks. Now, what kind of eggs should you eat? Look at the egg yolk, the yellow part. If it is just plain kind of yellow color, that's not good. But if it becomes more golden amber color, then you know it has more nutrients. It has more omega-3 oils and other good nutrients. Now, in general, we want to talk about protein. Now, protein, as we talked, glycogen was important for muscle energy, but now you need protein for muscle function. How do you build muscle? It has to come from some building block. The building block is protein. Protein is broken down to amino acids. Amino acids are then formed into all kinds of muscle components, and finally you do get muscle. Those who don't have enough protein may lack muscle. Now, how much protein do you actually need per day? It's roughly about 1 gram per kilogram per day. Like a 20-kilogram child needs about 20 grams of protein a day. A 50, let's say, kilogram child needs about 50 grams of protein per day. Do not eat that protein all at once. Break it up into like 3-part portions. Now, there's some people who are bodybuilders. They even eat protein at night, not to lose muscle. And sometimes I think a little protein snack is not such a bad idea before you go to bed, because that way you don't lose muscle. Now, how often should children eat in general? Children should really eat, I think, at least like every 3 to 4 hours. Their metabolism is high, so they have to be fed. Now, by the way, and if we're talking about like chicken and other kinds of meat, I think you can probably get better meat products if you get it from a farmer market where you know the farmer, and he's got, farm-raised, wild, running around chickens that are not industrialized in cages. So those are going to be better foods. And so now let's talk about seafood. Is something that most children don't like. I normally try to introduce children via, let's say, tunsis or tuna fish. And 1 can of tuna fish is about 30 grams of protein. So if you can also make these tuna salads where you can mix in maybe a little bit of mayo, some tomatoes, a little bit of onion. You can make sandwiches, and it's a wonderful thing to even have during sports training. Now, what's really important for children is this omega-3 oils. And omega-3 oils are necessary for children for brain development and many, many other healthy functions of the body. Fruits, vegetables, and berries. It's always best to try to go to a local market where you know the farmers and you can be sure that they're really produced clean, good fruits, vegetables, and berries. And something I do see in Latvia a lot, which I'm kind of think should be changed, is that I don't see enough leafy green vegetables eaten as salads. You do see this Latvian tendency to make this traditional Latvian salad, which is the cucumbers, sour cream, the onion, the tomato. So you try to switch over to like fresh leafy vegetables, and then you cut in some onions, some radishes, carrots, and so on, and then add a little bit of salad dressing, or the simplest thing is just use balsamic vinegar a little bit with oil, like olive oil, and there you have an excellent salad. You can also add to it some protein. You can add maybe a little bit of some pieces of meat or other types of protein. Now, I think that the raw, uncooked sauerkraut is about one of the best foods in the world. Now, cabbage grows really very well in Latvia. You have the red cabbage, you have the green cabbage. I personally prefer the red cabbage. I think that that redness has more nutritional value. Green, I don't think as much. Now, sauerkraut is, you take the cabbage and you ferment it overnight, and then the next day you have this sauerkraut. Now, the problem is that people then, as I see in a lot of restaurants, they will have sauteed sauerkraut. Once you saute that sauerkraut, you've lost all of that fermentation bacteria, which is very good for intestinal health. And this is something which is a crime, but we can offset that by eating raw sauerkraut every day and drink kefir also plain every day. Now, there's the whole issue of the microbiome, which has come up in science. We have found that the intestinal microbiome, which is the trillion viruses, bacteria, fungi that live there, are very necessary for good health. And if they're out of balance, you can wind up with all kinds of illnesses, infections, and cancers maybe, because it is also a source of immunity. People don't realize that this intestinal microbiome weighs about 2 kilograms about. So this is a big mass. So it's something that needs to be balanced all the time. The best way to balance it is to use these probiotic foods, the foods which are fermented, which have bacteria, which then can replace the bacteria that you need in the intestines. Now, dairy products are very popular in Latvia and also in the Scandinavian countries. There is a big variety of cheeses out there. The Holland cheese is very nice, the Gouda, Edam cheese. There's also local, like this Russian cheese, which is nice. So I think Remy carries a good, decent variety of cheeses. So cheeses are good. However, if you're an adult, you're trying to lose weight, there's a lot of fat there. For children, I think you don't worry about it because they may need the fat because fat is a source of calories, and some children don't get enough calories. Now, milk is probably one of the best nutrients there is. Milk just about has everything. Now, depending on your child's height and weight, if the child's overweight, you may want to go to a low-fat milk. If the child is underweight, you want to go to a whole milk. So you have to kind of balance the milk product to the child. Now, milk, let's say you take about a cup of milk, you will have close to about 8 grams of protein right there. Now, yogurt per 100 milliliter serving is about 3.5 grams of protein. Now, kefir, what is it? Kefirs. What is the difference between kefirs and yogurt? Kefirs is made with a group of special bacteria, which might be 10 to 20 different bacterial species, whereas yogurt will have only 2 or 3 species of bacteria. Therefore, for good health, I think you should drink kefir almost every day if you're really trying to build up your microbiome. Now, if you take antibiotics, that really ruins the microbiome system in your intestines, and you can wind up with illnesses. So the best thing to do is to drink some kefir while you're taking the antibiotic and stay on a kind of a probiotic diet, which is the diet that's a fermentation diet, like I mentioned, sauerkraut, all sour foods, the kefirs, kimchi, which is a fermented food used in Korea a lot. That's use there, but if you can get it, it's good. Now, the other thing is bispins. Bispins is the very sort of, I think, the most underutilized food for athletes or even for people. I don't see that many people eating bispins. I mean, if you go to many places, restaurants, where you serve yourself, make salad, you'll see bispins there, but in Latvia you don't. So it is undervalued, and I think people should be. It's not that expensive, so you probably should eat some bispins, which is probably less expensive and has a high level of protein than cheese does. So look at that. So 1 cup of cottage cheese is about 28 grams of protein. Now, talking about fruits, berries, and juices. Now, fruits should be eaten whole. If you squeeze out the juice out of a fruit and throw away the rest, you've really thrown away a lot of nutrition. That's not a good idea. So it's really best to eat the whole fruit with all of the other elements rather than the juice present. So it's a much more nutritious food. And if you buy these boxes of juices, a lot come from concentrates, there's added sugars, there's all kinds of added colors. Those aren't really the best juices. But if you can, get the real fruit, do that. Otherwise, look for good quality juice products. Now, berries, I think, are one of the best foods on the planet. And the reason I say that is that they contain this coloring, which when you squeeze it on a white cloth, the cloth will become, so it will come that color. And therefore, that staining property of a berry has a lot of nutrient values which prevent a lot of diseases, cancers, and so on. So try to eat berries which have that particular value. And Latvia has the advantage of having a great abundance of many different berries. I mean, you have there, you can get upenes, jāņogas, erkšķogas, kazinas, melenes, avenes, zilenes, and so on, aronia. Well, I mean, this is like the biggest, most beautiful group of berries you can have. And I think that Latvians should be more, especially for children, be aware of the richness that you have there and take advantage of it. So, and you can maybe go to farmers markets to get some of these, or you can just sort of source out, maybe go to Google and see where you can get the local good aronias or jāņogas and so forth. Now, nuts and seeds. In this topic, a lot of people don't realize, but nuts do have protein. Seeds contain protein. One thing I forgot to mention was beans. I don't see Latvians eating a lot of beans. It's not like a bean culture compared to Latin America. Latin America is beans and rice, and that's how they survive, and it's not expensive. So though beans have protein, rice has protein. So therefore, and then nuts have protein. These are all natural things. And you also have seeds. What you have in Latvia is a lot of, let's say, sunflower. And sunflower seeds which are roasted are really pretty high in protein. Now, another source of high protein seed is actually hemp seed. Now, hemp seed cannabis has been grown for many years, and that has been ground up to make a butter. Well, people are now finding it's really a very good source of protein. So eating hemp seeds in some way is good for you. It has about 1 cup of hemp seeds has about 4.5 grams of protein. Now, another thing I see Latvians not doing is eating more laukzrieksti or hazelnuts. These are native to Latvia, and I don't see many Latvians eating them in their homes. And I don't even see where you can actually, like in Riga, I've never seen them where you could buy these nuts. And I just see that Latvia in general is not very much a nut culture. However, they're excellent for many oils, like the omega-3s for your brain. They're excellent in many different ways. So I would say Latvians should take advantage of what they have in their own backyard. Those are the hazelnuts, laukzrieksti. Now, there's also dark chocolate. Now, dark chocolate comes in 2 ways. The milk chocolate, which is sweet, has milk in it, And then you have dark chocolate, which is higher in the cocoa solids. About 65 to 75% of dark chocolate is cacao solids. Those cacao solids are high in phenols, which are antioxidants and have other good properties. So it's actually suggested by many nutritionists that maybe like out of a bar of chocolate, which is about 100 grams, you eat maybe 2 or 3 of those squares a day, or maybe between 20 and 40 grams a day, just as a health food. But don't go into the milk chocolates, because they're just not as good nutritionally. Now we do need drinks to stay healthy and to stay hydrated. Now, I have seen in Latvia many more products for sports performance in terms of drinks, which were not around. And the one I have happen to like is the one Mangodu, whatever, Zerens. And that one has actually a nice top, which you can open and close and then suck on it. And Gatorade is also very good. The main things you need in sport is water and sugar. And if you don't have those two things, you'll get dehydrated and get low in sugar, hypoglycemic. So you must replace the fluids you lose. Now, in generally principle, if a child loses about is a half a kilo, that's 500 grams in weight, that means you've got to replace that with about 400 to 500 milliliters of fluid. And you should weigh your child before the competition and after competition, and then you find out how many kilos have been lost. You can then use this formula to know how much fluid you should replace. Don't try to give it all at once, but do it over like 8 hours or so. And you can use even fruit juices. You don't have to use these sports drinks. I mean, sports drinks are kind of maybe really designed while you're competing. After competition, maybe it's not as big of a deal. But dehydration is a very serious issue. Now, I have worked in 5 Olympic Games, and I have seen Olympic athletes during their competition go to the back and get intravenous fluids in order to rehydrate themselves. Because it's well known, if you are dehydrated, your body temperature goes up. As the temperature goes up, you cannot perform well. And therefore, that's a kind of a danger thing, is to watch out for dehydration, especially if you're doing the long distance running, biking, and other types of sports like that. Even playing, football, that uses up a lot of water in your system. So in general, how often should children eat? Well, if the younger children should eat, I think maybe more often, maybe 4 times a day, 5 times a day, at least every 3 hours, because they burn it up fast. And then larger children can eat more. Maybe they should eat about every 4 hours. And but it is, like I mentioned before, try to maybe eat some protein before going to bed to kind of keep the protein on the body, especially if you're somebody who doesn't have enough muscle, or if you're trying to build muscle. Well, that's about all I have to say. Sorry, it was a little bit rushed, but you can thank you very much for your attention, and